The Amazon was one of the least explored places in modern history. But beneath its towering trees and twisting vines lies the memory of a hidden...
Everyone thought the Amazon was fully explored, a lost world hidden in plain sight. But we got it all wrong. When scientists scanned it from above, what they found shocked the entire universe. It wasn't just ruins. There was proof of a civilization so advanced, it rewrites everything we thought we knew about history. What exactly were they hiding? And why did it disappear? Now, we might be wondering, how did the entire scientific community get it so wrong for this long? Well, the answers lie inside a massive myth we're about to shatter. The illusion of the empty jungle. For hundreds of years, mainstream science viewed the Amazon basin as a counterfeit paradise. On the outside, it looked incredibly lush and vibrant, while on the inside, experts insisted the region was an environmental trap, famously calling it a green desert. Scientists argued that the heavy tropical rains constantly washed away essential nutrients from the ground, leaving behind acidic clay soil that could never grow enough food crops to feed a real civilization. So, because of this long-standing theory, textbook maps left the massive rainforest completely blank, labeling it a hostile wilderness where only small, scattered groups of nomadic hunter-gatherers could ever manage to barely survive. However, this view directly contradicted the very first eyewitness accounts written down during the 16th century. In 1541, a Spanish explorer named Francisco de Orellana led a daring expedition down the length of the Amazon River. His scribe, Gaspar de Carvajal, recorded mind-blowing descriptions of what the crew encountered along the way. He claimed they floated past massive, sparkling cities that stretched for miles along the riverbanks, protected by heavy defensive walls and guarded by thousands of highly organized warriors. But then, when European explorers marched into those exact same areas decades later, the glittering cities were entirely gone, replaced by tiny, isolated tribes. Driven by this confusing disparity, modern historians quickly dismissed Gaspar de Carvajal as an outright liar, claiming his journals were either vivid hallucinations brought on by starvation or fake stories cooked up to trick the Spanish king into funding more gold-hunting trips. By the 20th century, this dismissal became an official academic rule known as environmental determinism. During this period, a highly influential anthropologist named Betty Meggers claimed the tropical jungle environment created a strict ecological ceiling that permanently blocked human social progress. And Western researchers readily agreed with her because they suffered from a major cultural blind spot, which is the fact that they only recognized an advanced civilization if it built giant stone monuments, similar to the ancient structures found in Egypt, Greece, or Rome. So, since the Amazon basin lacked massive stone quarries, mainstream academia firmly assumed the entire region completely lacked a real history. The jungle itself guarded this secret perfectly. A thick emerald canopy towering 150 feet in the air acted as a natural camouflage, completely blinding modern researchers and forcing archaeologists to rely on slow, dangerous ground digging that barely scratched the dark surface. This severe underestimation of ancient indigenous capabilities became a deeply fossilized narrative that lasted well into the early times of the 21st century, convincing generations of students that the vast heart of South America was always a pristine, empty wilderness. And also, scholars fully believed that humanity never managed to master this brutal ecosystem. But this absolute scientific certainty was about to collide with a technology capable of looking directly through the solid jungle floor. What exactly was it? The technological blindfold lifted. The answer arrived through a revolutionary piece of aerospace engineering known as LiDAR, which is light detection and ranging. For decades, archaeologists dreamt of having a machine that could act as an X-ray for the planet, peeling back the thickest environments on Earth. Fortunately, this new system made that dream a reality by mounting high-powered laser scanners to the underbelly of airplanes and automated drones, turning standard flights into deep, penetrating historical surveys. As the aircraft flies in a systematic grid pattern high above the trees, it shoots a continuous stream of invisible light directly down toward the Earth. The system constantly measures the exact time it takes for each individual beam to strike an object and bounce back to the sensor, calculating distance with absolute mathematical certainty. You know, the speed of this data collection is hard to wrap your head around because the scanner fires anywhere from 1 million to several million precise laser pulses every single second. When these millions of beams hit the forest, the vast majority of them instantly bounce off the thick leaves, vines, and branches. However, a tiny percentage of those rapid-fire pulses manage to slip through the microscopic gaps in the heavy tropical foliage and strike the actual dirt floor. This creates a dense web of geographic data points that captures the exact shape of the hidden terrain below. Now, this is where the real magic happens back in the lab. Scientists take the massive cloud of data points and run them through advanced computer algorithms that separate the tree strikes from the ground strikes. The software deletes the vegetation entirely, performing a process researchers call digital deforestation. In seconds, the thick canopy vanishes from the screen, exposing a highly detailed three-dimensional topographic map of the bare Earth. The level of precision is incredible, mapping down to less than 20 centimeters per pixel. This allows researchers to spot tiny, human-made dirt structures, ancient ditches, and straight roadways that look completely different from natural hills or riverbeds. But before this development, archaeologists had to hack through the wilderness with machetes, facing venomous snakes, heavy downpours, and tropical diseases. Teams working on foot were often blind to what was right in front of them because a massive ancient wall can easily look identical to a natural ridge when covered in thick roots. An expedition could easily spend 20 years mapping a couple of square miles. Even so, a plane equipped with a laser scanner can map hundreds of square miles during a single afternoon flight. Many traditional scientists originally doubted the technology would ever work in South America, assuming the dense, multi-layered rainforest would act as a solid wall and completely absorb the light. Well, that skepticism vanished after early testing over ancient Mayan ruins in Central America proved lasers could conquer the jungle. The Lost Horizon. Armed with this paradigm-shifting tool, an international team of scientists flew over the remote Upano Valley in Ecuador, completely unprepared for the megastructures that would flash across their monitors. What they saw on those monitors would eventually make massive headlines around the world, totally overturning decades of scientific consensus in a single day. In January 2024, a French archaeologist named Stéphane Rosten and an international team of researchers published a landmark study in the journal Science. They officially introduced the world to an astonishingly old, massive urban network buried deep inside the Ecuadorian Amazon. This groundbreaking revelation did not happen overnight. Neither was it an easy discovery. The Ecuadorian National Institute of Cultural Heritage had quietly funded a massive 300-square-kilometer LiDAR sweep back in 2015. It required years of painstaking computer processing, careful filtering, and hazardous field verification to decode the sheer volume of anomalies before the team could confidently announce their incredible findings to the global public. The processed data revealed a hidden landscape engineered on a mind-boggling scale that defied everything taught in history. These laser scans exposed over 6,000 distinct, rectangular earthen platforms measuring up to 20 meters long and several meters high. Ancient builders deliberately constructed and arranged these massive mounds into highly organized clusters across the valley floor, creating elevated foundations for homes and public spaces. But you know, these platforms were not random piles of dirt. They served as the active foundations for daily life where thousands of people gathered. More so, ground excavations verified that these sites were occupied primarily by the pre-Columbian Quilamope and Upano cultures. To the absolute shock of historians everywhere, carbon dating established a continuous urban occupation starting as early as 500 before the Common Era. This timeline completely reshapes our understanding of global history, proving these massive settlements were thriving simultaneously with the Roman Empire and ancient Greece. It pushes back the timeline of complex Amazonian urban societies by more than 1,000 years, proving that advanced architecture existed here long before anyone previously believed. Furthermore, researchers identified 15 completely distinct settlements within the survey zone, all deeply interconnected with one another through a sophisticated regional network. Major urban centers named Kilamope and Sangay acted as central hubs, completely dwarfing the smaller agricultural support villages that surrounded them. And also, living so close to the active Sangay volcano created a fascinating paradox for these ancient populations. While the volcano posed a constant threat of volcanic destruction and dark ash storms, its frequent ash deposits acted as a rich, natural fertilizer for the soil. This unique geological quirk made the surrounding valley incredibly fertile, allowing farmers to achieve unprecedented agricultural yields that could easily sustain a massive, permanent population. This meant that instead of struggling to survive, these societies had an abundance of food. But it wasn't just the sheer number of structures that shocked the team. It was the mind-boggling geometrical precision of how they were connected across the landscape that would prove even more astonishing as they looked closer at the map. The Manhattan of the Amazon. When archaeologists analyzed the layout of these newly revealed settlements, they noticed something that completely shattered the image of the Amazon as an untamed wilderness. Instead of random groupings of huts scattered through the trees, the towns followed a strict repeating pattern. Experts openly describe the design as a rigid grid configuration that closely mirrors modern urban centers like Manhattan. Walking through these ancient neighborhoods would have felt strangely familiar to a modern city dweller because the streets met at precise angles. This was not a collection of isolated nomadic tribes living day to day. This was a meticulously planned society built with clear architectural foresight. The most incredible evidence of this advanced planning came in the form of massive engineered road networks that stretched across the landscape for several kilometers. These primary avenues were arrow straight, showing absolutely zero regard for the rugged and uneven terrain of the Andean foothills. To keep these highways perfectly level, ancient construction crews executed what researchers call the Great Cuts. They dug immense channels measuring up to 15 meters wide and down to 5 meters deep directly into the earth. Workers had to rely entirely on wooden tools, stone axes, woven baskets, and raw human muscle power to shift the landscape. This monumental task required the coordinated movement of millions of tons of heavy soil, all accomplished without a single draft animal or a single piece of iron machinery. These wide highways deliberately sliced straight through deep ravines and climbed up steep hillsides rather than bending around them, creating a signature hallmark of state-level engineering designed to project total territorial control over the valley. At the local neighborhood level, the domestic architecture followed an equally sophisticated blueprint known as the civic quadrangle structure. Builders grouped clusters of 3 to 6 massive earthen platforms around central, lower plazas. These elevated mounds served as high, flood-proof foundations for large communal longhouses and sacred temples, keeping the community safe above the damp jungle floor where daily business was conducted. Also, the vast network represents an advanced concept scientists now call low-density garden urbanism. Ultimately, this unique style of city planning seamlessly integrated residential neighborhoods with wide, green agricultural fields and engineered orchards. By weaving farmland directly into the fabric of the city, the Opano people completely prevented the hyper-congestion and disease outbreaks that regularly plagued the crowded stone cities of ancient Europe and Asia. Even though constructing and maintaining such a unified regional system required an immense, highly specialized, and stratified workforce, it stands as definitive proof of complex socio-political hierarchies and central planning bodies that could organize tens of thousands of citizens over long distances. As the scientific world reeled from the Ecuadorian discoveries, another LiDAR scan hundreds of miles away in Bolivia exposed something even more bizarre: colossal pyramids hidden in plain sight. Pyramids in the swamps. The next big surprise came from the southwestern corner of the Amazon basin, hidden inside a Bolivian region called the Llanos de Mojos. This territory is a strange mix of wide-open grasslands and patches of dense jungle, where the weather swings wildly between intense droughts and massive floods every single year. Here, a German archaeologist named Heiko Prümers led a research team that published a revolutionary study in the journal Nature. exposing an ancient civilization that completely blew past historical assumptions out of the water. They mapped the remnants of the enigmatic Kasarabe culture, a highly organized society that thrived from roughly 500 to 1400 during the Common Era. By analyzing a massive LiDAR survey covering 4,500 square kilometers, researchers discovered a level of regional integration that nobody thought was possible in this part of South America. At the center of this sprawling network stood two massive urban capitals named Kotoka and Landivar. These giant hubs acted as the political and religious command centers for a vast territory, surrounded by a highly organized, multi-tiered hierarchy of smaller secondary and tertiary towns. When the digital canopy was stripped away, it revealed jaw-dropping civic ceremonial architecture hiding beneath the forest floor. The laser scans showed monumental earthen platforms topped by massive 22-meter-high step pyramids. Standing over 70 feet tall, these mud brick giants served as the imposing centers of religious and political power, rising high above the treetops to command the landscape. So, to protect these sprawling metropolitan hubs, the Kasarabe people built incredible defensive infrastructure. The laser scans uncovered major cities completely enclosed by sophisticated networks of concentric moats, ramparts, and heavy earthwork fortifications designed to control human access and keep invading forces at bay. This architecture was vastly different from the famous stone cities built by the Maya in Central America. And because the Amazonians lacked stone quarries, they relied entirely on mud and earth. Over the centuries, these earthen structures eroded under heavy tropical storms and were swallowed by relentless jungle growth, making them invisible to the naked eye. Yet, their sheer physical footprint and structural complexity easily rival the famous urban centers of Central America, proving that civilization does not require stone blocks to be considered grand. Now radiating outward from the central capitals, massive elevated causeways stretched over the horizon, locking the landscape together. These engineered highways connected the urban elite with outlying farming communities and distant hunting grounds, demonstrating absolute human dominion over a highly challenging ecosystem. The scale of this network proves that the Kasarabe culture possessed advanced engineering knowledge that allowed them to organize labor across an entire region. Surrounded by seasonal floods and torrential rains, these ancient engineers couldn't just build upwards, they had to master the flow of water itself. Engineering the floodwaters. You see, this extreme environment required a completely new way of thinking about survival, turning ancient Amazonians into some of the most sophisticated hydrological engineers of the ancient world. Recent breakthroughs, provided by archaeologist Mark Robinson and an international team of remote sensing experts, revealed that these prehistoric societies possessed a breathtaking understanding of large-scale water management throughout the Bolivian and Brazilian Amazon. The seasonal ecological crisis of the Llanos de Mojos in Bolivia presented a truly massive challenge to anyone trying to build a permanent home there. Every year, torrential rainfall routinely floods over 100,000 square kilometers of savanna, transforming the entire region into an impassable inland sea for months at a time, before drying up completely under a scorching sun. Facing this harsh reality, the local populations refused to flee, choosing instead to completely redesign their geography. When the airborne lasers mapped this territory, they exposed a vast, artificial network of canals, intersecting dikes, and raised embankments snaking across the flat plains. These immense earthworks were carefully designed to redirect the massive volume of floodwaters away from residential zones and funnel them directly toward designated agricultural areas. So, instead of merely defending themselves against the rising tides, these ancient planners found a clever way to capture the floods for their own benefit, ensuring their neighborhoods stayed dry while their fields received the vital moisture they needed to thrive. This network also laid the foundation for one of their most brilliant innovations, which was a highly advanced system of prehistoric aquaculture. Ancient engineers intentionally built precise structural gaps within their long earthen embankments to create massive fish weirs and artificial ponds across the savanna. As the seasonal floodwaters began to recede, millions of migrating fish became trapped within these artificial bottlenecks. This clever trapping mechanism allowed the communities to harvest massive quantities of fresh protein during critical seasonal transitions. It effectively insulated the entire population from food scarcity, providing a reliable food supply whether the region was experiencing a severe summer drought or a historic winter deluge. And to secure their regular carbohydrate supply, they constructed extensive systems of raised agricultural fields alongside their channels.
That ancient people shaped the forest. The species that increased near earthworks were very likely planted, protected, and even encouraged.
These long mounds elevated vulnerable crops well above the toxic, standing floodwaters that would otherwise rot the roots of their plants. By utilizing the nutrient-dense sediments left behind by the moving water, farmers managed to secure up to 3 successful harvests every single year. This whole operation represents a complete subversion of natural geography. Even though the groups did not adapt passively to the harsh hydrology of the Amazon basin, they fundamentally reshaped the landscape into a human-controlled machine. Yet, manipulating water was only half the battle. To sustain hundreds of thousands of lives, these ancient societies had to solve the puzzle of the Amazon's infertile soil, and their solution was nothing short of alchemy. The alchemy of black gold. If you walk through the Amazon today, you will quickly notice that the natural soil is surprisingly terrible for standard farming. It is mostly a sterile, acidic yellow clay that loses its few remaining nutrients the moment you clear away the protective canopy trees. For a long time, Western scientists believed this poor ground quality made it impossible for large civilizations to ever grow or expand here. However, researchers eventually stumbled upon deep pockets of pitch-black earth that stood in profound difference to the surrounding yellow wasteland. Now, locals call this mysterious black dirt Terra Preta de Indio, or Amazonian dark earth. And then, modern chemical testing and LiDAR mapping confirmed that this hyper-fertile soil is definitely not a natural geological phenomenon. Instead, it is a completely human-made masterpiece, intentionally engineered by ancient societies over thousands of years to transform a barren rainforest floor into a rich, permanent food machine.
Ancient Amazonians intentionally created patches of rich, dark soil, known as Terra Preta or Amazonian dark earth.
The secret behind this ancient agricultural alchemy comes down to a very specific, carefully managed format. Instead of clearing forests and burning them completely to ash, which quickly washes away in the rain, these early innovators used a clever process called low-temperature smoldering, and it created biochar, a special stable kind of charcoal that acts as a permanent sponge for nutrients. They mixed this charcoal with animal bone fragments, crushed fish remains, composted manure, and thousands of broken pottery shards. This unique combination created a self-regenerating miracle. The charcoal provided a highly stable home for a specific community of microscopic organisms and beneficial fungi. Also, this microscopic ecosystem allows the soil to literally rebuild itself over time. While normal tropical dirt loses its minerals during heavy downpours, Terra Preta locks in vital elements such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and calcium, remaining intensely fertile for centuries without requiring any extra fertilizers from modern factories. Possessing these pockets of black gold changed everything for the ancient populations of the river basin. It allowed them to abandon nomadic lifestyles and shifting slash-and-burn practices, moving directly into permanent, intensive farming that supported massive population densities matching those of medieval Europe. This dependable soil security allowed them to reshape the entire forest ecosystem around them. When scientists combined LiDAR data with modern botanical surveys, they discovered that vast swaths of what we consider wild jungle are actually ancient manicured orchards known as food forests. These areas are heavily packed with domesticated tree species that humans favored for survival, including nutritious Brazil nuts, sweet cacao, acai, and manioc roots. It turns out the Amazon rainforest is largely a cultural artifact. It is a complex landscape heavily selected, planted, and groomed by billions of indigenous hands over millennia. With booming populations, abundant food, and cities that rivaled the old world, these societies seemed invincible. However, why did they suddenly vanish into thin air? The Great Disappearance. Finding the answer to that question remains one of the biggest challenges in modern archaeology because the disappearance of these massive urban networks was incredibly fast and total. Between the years 300 Common Era and 1400 Common Era, entire sprawling population centers completely emptied out and were abandoned. What makes this loss so incredibly baffling is that it occurred centuries before any European explorers ever set foot on the South American continent, meaning these societies crumbled entirely under the weight of local environmental and social pressures rather than foreign conquest. For a long time, scientists looking at the Upano Valley believed they had found a perfect volcanic culprit to explain the tragedy. Early soil cores extracted from the valley floor revealed distinct layers of thick black volcanic ash, leading researchers to blame a catastrophic eruption of the nearby active Sangay volcano for choking out the civilization around 600 Common Era. While some paleoclimate data suggests wider weather disruptions may have played a role, modern scientific consensus still heavily points to the volcano. The physical evidence shows that massive ash storms and environmental degradation from Sangay directly forced the population to abandon their grand earthen cities, bringing a sudden, violent end to a millennium of urban success. This global shift triggered what historians call the Great Dry, a series of devastating mega-droughts that struck the entire Amazon basin for decades at a time. These endless dry spells severely disrupted the delicate, engineered water systems that these cities completely relied on for their daily survival, intensive crop farming, and complex aquaculture networks. The climate crisis exposed the inherent fragility of these highly specialized, stratified, and low-density urban systems. When the canals ran dry and the fish weirs failed, their intensive farming models collapsed completely, triggering widespread famine, political chaos, and massive social upheaval that broke the civilization apart from the inside out. Well, a similar fate struck other parts of the continent during a secondary wave of collapse around 1400 Common Era, which brought down the Casarabe culture in Bolivia. Whatever remaining populations managed to survive these climate disruptions were hit by an even worse catastrophe in the 16th century. During this period, new cultures emerged, and when European explorers finally arrived in the 16th century, they still encountered thriving, massive river chiefdoms. The arrival of European explorers introduced apocalyptic Old World diseases, such as smallpox and influenza, wiping out up to 95% of the remaining indigenous populations.
That the Spaniards brought smallpox into the Amazon. Smallpox devastated the local population because there was no immunity to it. There was a massive die-off. The cities were deserted.
With no one left to maintain the infrastructure, the aggressive tropical rainforest reclaimed these abandoned earth and timber cities in a matter of decades, burying monumental plazas and highways under a thick green shroud until they became completely invisible. The erasure was so complete that history forgot they ever existed until these laser scans forced us to throw what we knew about history directly into the trash. The ultimate paradigm shift, rewriting the history of the Americas. For generations, traditional textbook history relied on a persistent, colonialist myth that painted the pre-Columbian Amazon as a completely pristine wilderness. This old Eurocentric theory claimed that the original indigenous groups were nothing more than small, nomadic societies who wandered through the dense trees without ever significantly altering their environment. However, this incoming laser data proves that this widespread historical idea is entirely false. Indigenous populations were never passive parts of the background scenery. They were active creators of their own world who managed the land with immense skill. Historically, European empires used this false idea of an untouched wild forest to legitimize massive colonial land theft across South America. They officially classified the entire Amazon basin as terra nullius, which is a Latin phrase meaning nobody's land. By claiming that the jungle completely lacked structural development, advanced engineering infrastructure, or civilized land tenure, colonizers could easily pretend the territory was empty and open for conquest. These modern architectural discoveries completely flip that old narrative, and provide powerful, long-overdue vindication for indigenous oral histories. For generations, native tribes maintained verbal traditions stating that their ancestors lived in grand, highly structured, and populous ancestral kingdoms. Western academies frequently dismissed these detailed accounts as folklore, yet the modern laser maps prove those oral histories were accurate all along. Moreover, the sheer numbers emerging from these recent studies are fundamentally shifting our understanding of global human demographics. Based on the size and structural density of these newly mapped urban grids, scientists now calculate that the pre-Columbian Amazon basin alone supported an astonishing population of between 8 million and 20 million people. This massive population density completely alters our baseline understanding of global demography, showing that this geographic region was once home to an immense network of human beings that easily matches or exceeds parts of medieval Europe. Rather than destroying their surroundings to achieve this massive growth, these ancient societies acted as brilliant pioneers of regional sustainability. They operated as some of the most advanced environmental engineers in human history, successfully reshaping an entire tropical biome to feed millions of citizens without destroying its legendary biodiversity. These incredible findings mean that South America must now be placed on an equal historical footing with the other great cradles of ancient urbanism, such as Mesopotamia, the Nile Valley, and the Indus Valley. Still, a massive problem remains. We have only scraped the absolute surface of this lost world, and a modern race against time is underway before it is lost forever. The race against time. You see, this urgency comes down to an overwhelming reality hidden directly beneath the dense trees. Shocking statistical projections published by leading researchers like Vinicius Peripato estimate that between 10,000 and 24,000 pre-Columbian monumental earthworks remain completely undiscovered across the region. Despite making massive international headlines recently, researchers have systematically scanned less than 10% of the entire Amazon basin with high-resolution aerial LiDAR technology, leaving a vast majority of the tropical landscape completely unmapped and unexplored. Modern deforestation ironically exposes South American earthworks while destroying them with heavy machinery before scientists can catalog them. To combat this loss, a tech-driven alliance of indigenous communities, archaeologists, and tech companies uses drone LiDAR and AI to locate these ancient cities first. Preserving these sites provides vital lessons for modern climate resilience through ancient garden urbanism and carbon-sequestering terra preta soil. Ultimately, mapping the Amazon proves that history's deepest mysteries are right beneath our feet, not on distant planets. The lasers have pulled back the curtain, leaving us to wonder, what other lost chapters of our civilization are waiting in the dark? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to smash the like button, share, and subscribe to our channel. For more incredible content like this, click on the next video on your screen.